Welcome to Open Mind Integration. It's Christopher Gunlock, and this is the Psychedelic Harm Reduction class, Part 8, Setting in Psychedelics. Please check out all 12 classes, openmindintegration.com. And the usual disclaimer. So there's actually a lot that goes into this. I actually find that this is one of the hardest things to lock down when you're planning a psychedelic experience. But it can also have one of the hugest effects on, I mean, it can affect everything really. So take your time. You know, if you need to wait a little bit to put together a situation with a better setting, it might be worth it. So what I'll be arguing here is that intention forms a lot of how you go about having your psychedelic journey and all the planning stages ahead of time. You know, the setting in particular is something that you know, sometimes you have to plan it ahead. You know, there's may not be something available depending on when you're planning on doing it. So be honest with yourself here, and I get into this a lot more in the egoic resistance class, but sit with it for a bit. You know, you can get a lot out of, you know, not jumping into a psychedelic experience just on a whim. There's a time and a place for that maybe, but you know, when you can plan some things ahead of time, there's a lot you can accomplish to align things in a way that is most ideal for you in that moment. And be aware that intention is not the same as expectation. Again, we get into this in other classes, but think of intentionality as broadly, you know, which direction are you trying to go? But at the same time, allowing the ultimate outcome to be whatever it is going to be, to not try to control that. And that's more what turns into expectation. So you can think of this spectrum to help you refine, yeah, where are you at really? What's the real reasons you're doing this? So now you can start to align the pieces of how your journey is going to look with your intentionality. So, you know, maybe you're wanting to, you know, just have a really introspective journey, you know, face some issues that you've been having, you know, find some new insights. Well, then maybe going to a party on mushrooms is not the right kind of setting for you. Maybe it's a guided journey in a more secluded location. You know, and that location could, you know, be somewhere more out of town to give you that feeling of, you know, you're kind of getting away from things. All of these little things come into play. And when I'm working with clients on this, helping them figure out, you know, how to set this up, um, I like to really rely a lot on a person's just, you know, just their instincts. What's their intuition telling them about, you know, where should I be? What will it look like? Who will I be with? What kinds of things I'm going to be surrounded by? What will I be looking at? Um, just your gut feeling is oftentimes going to be very informative, because what we're ultimately planning for is for part of our unconscious to affect the experience. And the nature of the unconscious is that we're unconscious of it. So it can be hard to know really what's going on under the surface there of what you're aware of. So um, you know, I recommend folks meditate on it, like literally meditate. You know, allow your mind to quiet down some of the normal chatter, the automatic thinking, um, to just get a peek. Obviously, we're taking the psychedelics to do that anyway, but um, get a little preview ahead of time, and that can help you set things up in a way that'll be more conducive to what's actually going to unfold. So now let's look at some broad categories of where this setting could be and what it might be like. The classic home journey, right? Stay at home, yet go far away with the help of our friends of psychedelics. So, solo trippers are often going to default to this. The safety and comfort and familiarity can definitely be a plus. I do like to look at things from both directions, though. There's pluses and minuses for some of this stuff. Um, Safety and comfort also can kind of limit the range of your experience. It can make it more difficult to see outside the box because, psychedelics themselves don't necessarily guarantee that you're going to create new pathways of thinking. It's just going to make the potential for that higher. So if you don't engage that potential, it may not actually happen. And you'll see in some other classes I talk about things like selective integration, and that can be one of them. People that have only ever tripped by themselves in their home, there could be some things you're missing for sure, for sure. If we have too much control over things, too much comfort, it can make it less likely that we'll face some of the difficult things about ourselves that could be beneficial. The sensitivity to familiar stimuli, I've seen this in a lot of my clients that are struggling with some mental health issues or just generally in a not great place in their life, kind of stuck in the mud. And being at home, they view as just kind of making them more depressed and just kind of surrounded by everything that is keeping them down. And so sometimes getting out of that, getting a fresh perspective while under the medicines can be very helpful. So being at home, pluses and minuses for sure, for sure. I would say doing it there can be really great, but don't always do it at home. Like try to get out of your house every now and then. One plus though is the opportunities for integration are pretty immediate. I mean, you're surrounded by all your stuff. Everything that's most relevant to you is probably going to be at your home, and so you can kind of go straight to addressing them. Maybe even the process of changing things up. One thing that happens to me a lot when I'm doing psychedelics at home is I start cleaning. I start becoming more sensitive to the aspects of my living space that are not as healthy as they could be. And yeah, cleaning can be really satisfying. But all kinds of stuff potentially there. So yeah, and then if it's a cluttered or messy home, that combined with the general increase in chaos with psychedelics, it may not be the direction that could be sustainable. It depends on the person, of course, but it's just something to consider. You're going to be more affected by those energies. So also, yeah, may distract from more inward journey potential. So this could really go both ways. Sometimes that comfort is enough for someone to let go of what's around them and just kind of go inward. But also too, it could be distracting, looking at all your stuff from a different perspective. You might be, really entranced by it and get more curious of what's outside you. So yeah, could go both ways though. So if you get a chance to get outside your house for a journey, but want to still be in a place, sometimes being at a friend's home, or maybe it's the sitter's home, or maybe it's an Airbnb. Airbnbs actually I find work really well. If you get a good one, it can actually be quite ideal. They're kind of already set up to have less hazards and to be more pleasing, especially aesthetically. And they're oftentimes kind of like vacationy in the way that they're set up. So if you need to, step outside your normal surroundings for a bit, it can be quite therapeutic to have a psychedelic experience a little further out there, have a little bit more peace of mind, a little more simplicity, maybe a little more beauty too. That perspective can be a little bit more expanded when you're not so confined by the familiarity of your home and maybe the city that you live in. So decompression, the sterility, I use that word lightly because it can also be like a blank canvas. These Airbnbs, bring some tapestries, some mood lighting, some candles. You can have your own little thing going on. So there's kind of more possibilities there sometimes compared to if it's just your home. Your home is very ingrained in a specific lifestyle. So yeah, mix things up sometimes. And then there's the times where you're going out to attend something that's more organized. It's a retreat. It might be a group ceremony. Usually it is with groups, but it can totally be one of those fancy private ceremonies. You get the luxury treatment. But either way, the perks of this is, it's set up ahead of time. Like there's a lot of thought that's been put into it that you didn't have to do. And hopefully, you've got some experienced facilitators and people that know what they're doing. There's a lot that can be well suited to having while you're undergoing these experiences. Usually tailored to a wider audience, though. I'd say that's plus or a minus there. You may not get as much of the personal care as you would if you had a personal guided journey or maybe even a solo journey. Although again, those luxury private retreats, yeah, it can possibly be very personalized. Enhanced security and amenities, yeah, that can be really great. Certainly not a guarantee, but again, they put a lot of thought into it, and if they're experienced in what they're doing, they know how to make it safe. So good for everyone all around there. Less familiarity, certainly, just by the nature of it. But the comfort, again, if it's a good one, comfort could be pretty good. It could be better than what's at your home. Other modalities, oftentimes at these retreats, especially the multi-day ones, where it's not just like a medicine ceremony you're doing, but you got some breath work, some yoga, some shadow work, other stuff. It can be a nice combination to do a lot of work on yourself. Possibly different cultural contexts, so a lot of these are in different countries. And that can have a big effect on things. When people are even just speaking in another language, there's a much different dynamic there that you could be more sensitive to while under the medicine. And just the ways of doing things. I mean, your surroundings, really so much changes when you go to a very different geographical location. So definitely consider that. Wide range of quality here. Yeah, as I said, for each of these, it could go either way as far as more comfort, less comfort, quality, what exactly is happening there. So obviously do your research. Journey on the go. So this is very much referring to being mobile outside and enjoying nature. This is probably for those lower dose ranges, maybe medium dose ranges, depending on how experienced you are. But obviously, there's some safety hazards here to be aware of. You don't have the comfort of a location, so don't get injured. Your senses and mobility and basically your entire cognitive functions are altered. So yeah, be mindful. Some people are more well suited to this than others. Getting lost is a very real possibility, especially if you're kind of far out there. Things look different, right? It's the familiarity is not something you can count on as well with psychedelic experience. Your basic needs too, physical, the physiology while on these substances can be pretty different, or at least in the way that you perceive them. So something as simple as making sure you are eating can be something you need to plan ahead about, so have your supplies. But yeah, this can be amazing though too. I mean, gosh, we've talked about how nature is just such a big thing in other classes. The experience of psychedelics, you can appreciate nature to just infinitely greater degrees. So yeah, the things you can see and experience out there really opens up the possibilities. So yeah, be mindful, especially if you're camping, you're staying for a long period. Maybe have a buddy with you that is not on psychedelics. Yeah, just think ahead. And then you get your therapy clinics. So you don't have this as much, but it's growing. For now, you're looking at mostly ketamine clinics. But cannabis and psilocybin is coming up. There's going to be MDMA soon, and so some of this will be very integrated into the current medical system. There's probably some gray areas involved, especially. I mean, psychedelics in general really kind of disrupt the normal paradigms and protocols in medicine. So it's unclear exactly how this will look going forward, but pharmaceutical companies and the academic institutions, they're absolutely going to be involved with this. And there's just so much that can be done and should be done. But of course, a lot of money and bureaucracy. So those are all pluses and minuses, right? Like for some people, that may be added safety and comfort to know that there's a bunch of science backing it up, and protocols and medical professional medical practitioners, licensing boards, insurance companies. They all have their pros and cons to them. I would say specifically, you're not going to get any of the plant medicine here. Modern, science and medicine is limited to pharmaceuticals, and that's not because they don't like plants, but it's they literally cannot study plants in the same way. You can't have repeatable, predictable results. I mean, even when you have pharmaceuticals, you don't really have that, but when you have plants, it's even less so. Also, you can't patent a whole plant either. You can only patent specific ways of manufacturing and specific compounds. So the limitations are very, very strict right there. Medical style is just referring to, yeah, the protocols, the evidence-based procedures. Everything has to be run through strict systems of checks and balances, and so you're not going to get much of that kind of go with the flow mentality that you would in traditional medicine. And check out part 1 of this class, the essentials, to go more in depth into the differences between traditional medicine and clinical medicine. But yeah, there are definitely some pluses here. I mean, the professional staffing and accountability procedures are standard to therapy clinics and clinical medicine, and that's a great thing. There's a higher likelihood of having a good result when you have systems like that in place. I wouldn't say necessarily that makes it better overall, but it's good to have. So the legality too, obviously a plus. Socially acceptable, another one. That's actually a pretty big factor for some people, is just being able to talk about it, right? Especially if like it has a great effect on you, you're gonna want to talk about it. But if it's something that you did underground, there's certain people in your life you probably won't want to say that to. So yeah, there's a big distinction there. Focused approaches. Yeah, that's generally how clinical medicine works, right? Like you have to have a specific diagnosis and a specific treatment for that diagnosis. And there's less room for just kind of seeing what happens. And again, that's one of the big differences with traditional medicine. Yeah, and as I mentioned, insurance companies, licensing boards, big influence. That's money, right? Money and power. So if your well-being is not the priority there, then yeah, it's not great to have. So let's talk a bit about safety. So I like to imagine a person on psychedelics is a lot like a child, like a young child, maybe even an infant, depending on the dose. And you wouldn't have sharp objects, toxic things, slippery, fragile things, frightening things around a small child. So just look at it that way, and set up your surroundings so that things are the opposite of that. Soft, cushy, nice, friendly things, so that you can afford to let loose a bit. And that's generally what's going to lead to the therapeutic outcomes, is if you don't have to worry about getting physically hurt. So one of the worst things that can happen is if you're in a place where, maybe there's neighbors or just people that stop by, roommates, family, friends. Um, if you're deep in it, like, imagine the moment you're about to have this big epiphany, this big breakthrough, and there's a knock on the door, right? It could ruin everything. It could ruin hours of work and or worse, like it could be traumatizing even. So do your best to secure a location where you can be, 99 at least percent sure that there's not going to be disturbances, especially people that are not supposed to be there. And in general, everyone present during a psychedelic experience needs to have a pretty clear role in it. There's certainly, the recreational perspective where, you might just be hanging out with people. And if that's the intention, then fine. Yeah, unexpected people is just part of what's happening. But especially if you're in a therapeutic context or a ceremonial context, it's critical that everyone present has a specific reason for being there. Sober sitters obviously can be a big part of this. Fewer the better in general. Once you start getting these really big ceremonies, it's hard to keep track of what's going on, who's who, what they're doing, and of course, just if you can establish a certain level of trust with the people, that's ideal. So entropy is a concept that I've talked about in previous classes. I think the neurobiology one or the psychology one. And we talk about psychedelics as increasing entropy, the potential for chaos, for disorder, abstraction. And that's part of the game, but that means that we need to balance this with things that are in our control, particularly the setting. It's one of the reasons maybe you wouldn't want to trip in a messy room. Maybe clean up before you take the psychedelics. And because in general, one of the biggest fears that people have around psychedelics is the uncertainty, the unknown, just not knowing what could happen. Could be good, but it could be bad. And this uncertainty is unavoidable. And it's also part of the big lesson that it has to teach us is to develop a comfort with uncertainty. But in general, though, if that fear is present, if we can temper that with a setting that doesn't introduce a bunch of unnecessary entropy, unnecessary chaos, that's going to be conducive to a much more therapeutic outcome where you're going to come out better than you were before. And I can tell you on the other side of this, the trip sitting that I've done and the integration clients that I've had, by far the people, I mean, it's probably every person that I've met or talked to or heard of that has had like trauma after a psychedelic experience. It was because there was something that they didn't expect happening that happened and left them in this state of confusion or intense fear or anxiety. And if that's the way the trip goes and ends, that can linger or remain or just become seared into your mind. So this is huge. It's huge. We don't need to introduce extra chaos because what we're putting ourselves through is already pretty chaotic. So yeah, just be careful with this balance. All right, going outside. This is surprisingly a question I get quite a lot. Folks want to go to the park and see some nature. They don't want to just stay inside the whole time. And even in a therapeutic context, this can be a nice thing to take advantage of. If and there's caveats here for sure. Strangers, other hazards, all kinds of stuff, right? The outside is where all the variables are, and so ideally, if you're going to go outside, go somewhere where you're probably not going to be around people. Depending on the dose, right? Like some doses, you can pass for a sober person, but other doses, yeah, you're gonna be acting like Jesus or something. Well, I guess that would, yeah, the meme is referring more to looking crazy. But either way, yeah, you probably don't want to be around people who have no idea, what the context is of what you're saying and doing. So ideally more remote locations. Bring supplies with you if you're going to be out there for a while, but maybe also just don't go out for a long time too. Um, Sober sitter, obviously, or have an easy way to find you. Home bases and meeting points, just like again, it's like you're dealing with children. Um, set these things up ahead of time. So sometimes the people that you meet when you go outside are police officers, and you get a whole new set of variables thrown in there. So obviously minimize this wherever possible. Police are generally not trained to deal with people that are tripping. Well, they may have training, but it's definitely not going to be for your benefit. It's going to be for their own benefit. And well, we've all heard the stories with that. And so avoid them at all costs. Obviously, if you are doing something that they would be worried about, that's the first thing you should avoid. But also, yeah, just psychedelics in general. Being on psychedelics is not as much of a risk as having them on you. So try to just cut that out of the equation if you can. Be in a private location, being in public, you don't have as many rights. And then, yeah, just know your rights, right? Uh, Identifying someone in your group to be the one to handle things, that can be a good idea, so that the wrong person doesn't say the wrong thing. All it takes is just one person blurting out something that sounds ridiculous, and then, well, yeah, they're gonna be, their eyes are gonna be on you. So, yeah, just avoid this as much as you can. So we'll round out this class with just some key considerations that I've picked up over the years of trip sitting and sending people to trip sitters and ceremonies and working with clinicians. There's some things that you can add to your setting and your experience that can make a meaningful difference. So basic needs are pretty obvious, but sometimes we may take for granted that we wouldn't necessarily think of these things once we're already on the psychedelics. So just having this ahead of time, ready to go, just the stuff that maybe you, I mean, hopefully you won't need them, like emergency supplies, a communications device, but you definitely wouldn't want to not have it in the wrong situation. Some more optional stuff though, but things that could make a big difference. I'd say definitely better to be over prepared when you're, especially if you're heading out to some other location to have your experience. But comfort's a big one. We're going to be going through a lot, whether it's a happy trip or a hard trip. We're using a lot of energy, and at some point, we need to rest. Sleep is big. I can't stress that enough. A lot of times psychedelics will keep us awake, keep us going, but it's important at some point to rest because at least for the sake of just your health in general, but also your integration, that period right after, the days right after your experiences is very key. You've got a heightened neuroplasticity and a more of a expanded perspective to start making changes in your life and applying the lessons that you learned. But if you're burnt out and you're crashing, then all of that is wasted. You might end up worse off, frankly. So take care of yourself. Make sure you can find your refuge after the experience is over, and so you're not scrambling at the end to just have a place to rest your head. Nature can be nice. This is not necessarily something you can bring with you, but maybe so. Maybe some plants. Maybe bring an actual animal too. These can add some really nice elements. Art supplies, creative expression is huge. If you've never created art on psychedelics, you haven't lived. Trust me, there's the possibilities, like the real potential you can experience to a profound degree with creating art, music, or just even listening to music. So yeah, bring stuff, just in case, even if you don't think you want to paint something, bring some paints. Games, things that can engage the mind in novel ways. I've said this before, psychedelics don't guarantee a new pathway of thinking, they only create the possibility for it. So if you don't offer the opportunity to think in or do something in a different way, you may not ever do it. Decorations, aesthetics. This is something I get into in the spirituality class. There's something there that we don't necessarily notice when we're not on psychedelics. Beauty and order and symmetry, just general artistic expression. When we're surrounded by it, it changes us. It changes us on more levels than just what we see or hear. So put some care into it. Don't overdo it. You don't need kaleidoscopic, trippy patterns everywhere. Make it meaningful. That's the number one thing. The more meaningful the art is, and the space, the more you'll get out of it. Some projects, yeah, maybe you're coming in with the intention to work on something. Maybe there's something that you've had a kind of a writer's block, or there's a you want to see it from a different perspective. Could be an opportunity. Definitely gear your intention around that, though. If your intention is not to focus on that, it would just be a distraction. Another, stimulating things. Yeah, there's this. You can try out things that maybe it wouldn't be as interesting on its own, but with psychedelics, yeah, there's deeper layers to stuff. So this question can come up a lot, especially if you're deciding whether to be in your home or somewhere else, but also in the things that you bring with you. Familiar and unfamiliar are both potentially good or bad, at least in terms of what your intentionality is. And again, that should be informing all of this. But the familiar in general, lower entropy, less chaos. It's like even if you have a messy home, there's there's order to the messiness in a way, right? It's like you kind of know how it got there, even though it's unorganized. The imprinting effect, reprogramming. I mean, this is whether or not something's familiar, but especially familiar things, you can form a different relationship with it when you're on psychedelics. So that can be an interesting thing to play with. Comfort and safety, we've talked about that. Local integration opportunities. No travel time. So yeah, the recovery period, less likely to burn out if you can just go to bed and it's your bed and your home, and you can make yourself breakfast in the morning. Cost less money. Familiar people are easier to integrate. Yeah, more familiarity there. But the unfamiliar, yeah, can be good too. The entropy can be nice to stir things up if you're already in a state of low entropy and you need some new perspectives. Exploration, it's again that kind of recreational perspective of getting out there, seeing what's possible, and having the psychedelics augment that. New opportunities, but does require travel time. So yeah, something to consider there, and money can be a factor too, especially in some places. Meeting new people, that can be awesome. Maybe if that's part of your intention, is to get outside your comfort zone in terms of social interactions. So I really want to drive this point home, the come down, the aftercare. Big deal, big deal. If you got to go to work bright and early the next day, or you got all 10 things to worry about, yeah, it's going to cut into that critical period where you can really start forming a healthier habits and perceptions and belief systems. So really take your time. The higher dose, the more serious this is. Plan ahead. Where are you sleeping? How many days are you staying? How long is the medicine going to be in your system? So as I said, a lot of ways to stimulate and create new experiences with the combination of psychedelics. Um, the senses are amazing. There's lots to explore there, and as always, align this with your intentionality. Stimulation is going to be external usually, and could distract from something important internally that maybe you want to get into. So, um, potentially minimalism is maybe more the approach here. But not necessarily so. There's all kinds of possibilities, and so something worth thinking about. But when you're thinking about stimulation, always consider that what you're seeing before you take the psychedelics is not going to be what you're seeing when you're on the psychedelics. So, um, in general, we're augmenting again. Is it externally we're focusing or internally? One interesting thing about a lot of traditional ayahuasca ceremonies in particular is they often just do it at night in the darkness. I've heard some shamans say that you can see better in the dark when you're under the medicine, and that says a lot. That says a lot about where our sight, our inner sight, is taking us, and why that could be valuable. Because when the lights are on and there's a lot of stuff to look at, that's where our thoughts are going to go, and our thoughts are maybe not going to go to the parts of ourselves that we need to explore and the parts of ourselves that need some light shed on them. So the external darkness of the setting can have that effect in a big way. So um, check in on your intentionality. What's the real reason you're doing this? So if you don't want to distract from something deep inside you that could maybe be really beneficial to face, then yeah, maybe make the stimulation be less of something to look at, less of something to engage physically with. But I think maybe one example of stimulation that would be more internal is music, sound. Um, Sound is a very intimate experience, especially on psychedelics. It can feel like it's inside you or coming from inside you. And that's going to direct the attention inward. A lot of the traditional ceremonies, this is one of their main tools is music, song, singing, to bring your attention to the places that maybe need a little bit more attention, um, and allow you to let go of the normal distractions that we have. Another way to look at this is if you're taking psychedelics because you want to engage creatively, even in the realm of like problem solving too, I would say that's creativity of taking something in your life and looking at it from the perspective of these expanded states of consciousness. But that is pretty mutually exclusive with these more cathartic inward experiences. So you kind of have to pick one or the other. I mean, you could maybe do both, subsequently within one trip, but the phase that you're in is going to be pretty selective there. So a lot to say in terms of your setting, what that looks like. If you really just need to, purge some demons or work on some healing, the setting for that is probably not going to be very stimulating. Honestly, the minimalism is going to be ideal. Maximize comfort and minimize external stimulation. It might just be on a bed the whole time. I can imagine some of these ibogaine retreat centers. They just want you to lay down, and you don't worry about anything but what you're going through, and that's really the therapeutic method there. But yeah, certainly on the other side of it, though, it's definitely dips more into the recreational realm. But go to a place where you got art supplies, you got cool things to look at, cool things to experience. The party scene is obviously in that realm. Um, you're probably not going to be doing a lot of shadow work. You're probably not going to be hardcore introspective. But yeah, you could experience some new things, explore some new ways of expressing yourself, and that can be extremely valuable. But do be mindful. Yeah, there is a reason to be cautious about how much stimulation. The intentionality is at the core of this. Um, what is it that you're really getting out of just blasting yourself with colors and shapes and trippy things to look at? Is it serving you in a sustainable way? Are you coming out a better person? Well, yeah, maybe not, maybe not. So I can say a lot of the traditional cultures, um, the visionary experiences are not really the goal. The goal is living a healthy life, working through unconscious patterning. Um, the visionary experiences, though, the visions, they're they're kind of the reward after that. They can play a big role. I mean, certainly shamanism, the ancient lineages, um, there's a lot of stories about, a tribe discovering things through the shaman's visions, but um, they probably had to go through a lot of their own work in order to get to that point of being able to navigate that realm. So if you're just, smoking big hits of DMT just to see these portals of fantastic machinescapes, um, are you doing it for a reason that will help you, or is it potentially just kind of doing it just to see what happens? So we can see then that stimulation is also a distraction, and that sometimes it's important to let go of that and quiet things down. And then ultimately, the thing that many of us are looking for is that big release, the surrender, to let go. So, congrats again for getting through another class here on the setting of psychedelics. As you can see, a lot can go into this, and your intentionality really drives much of how this can look. But I also hope to have illuminated the possibilities, right? We don't have to just pigeonhole ourselves into one way of doing things. Psychedelics, it's a vast landscape of possibilities. So um, just as long as you're being responsible about aligning your intention to how you set things up and prepare, you could have a good time and get what you want out of it. And there's a ton more awesome content in the psychedelic harm reduction course, 12 classes altogether, each one designed to offer some really in-depth practical education on how to reduce your risks, maximize your benefits. And you can view all the slides for every class for free at openmindintegration.com. And there's a bunch of other educational content up there as well. And my personal services, of course, for people going through preparation and integration processes. Here to help folks go a little deeper, be a little safer about it. So please let me know. Thank you.